Matt, thanks for joining me, and congratulations on the book, Restrung.
Thank you so much, Clay. I appreciate you having me on.
And I think during our emails back and forth, I think I told you I'd started the book and I actually finished it this 2 days ago, and so I'm all the way through it now, and it's excellent.
Cool.
I write a newsletter, and one thing I've noticed is like I start out thinking I'm writing for my audience, and by the end of it, realize I'm writing to myself. Did you have any similar experience writing Restrung?
Definitely. Yeah, in fact, I was asked recently about, um, the fact a lot of people, it's sort of resonated with a lot of people. It's, Restrung Fatherhood in a different key, sort of about coming to grips with the death of my dad when I was in college and the realization I didn't really know him. He was kind of a workaholic type, wasn't around much. And my struggle to not pass down that emotional distance to my own son, which, hopefully I solved for in part by sharing with him my love of music. So he knows what makes his dad tick, which is not something I knew about my own dad. But, and so it sort of has resonated with a fair number of folks. And, that's very gratifying. But to your point, I didn't write the book, with that sort of in mind as sort of like having a kernel of universality to it. I wrote it just because I was in a place where I felt like I was wanting to, sort of process a lot that had happened. Enough time had passed since my dad had died when I was in college, and the birth of my son, which, several, probably 8, 10 years or something after I started writing, before I started writing the book. And so it sort of morphed out of some other writing that I had done. I had started this music blog, which is now Substack, which was initially trying to kind of nudge classic rock fans like myself out of the 1970s and into the modern era. But it ended up becoming a lot of more narrative, personal essays about music and parenting, and some about my dad. And one thing sort of led to another, and got me to this point where I felt like, I wanted to do a larger writing project, but it was always something that I just kind of felt like doing sort of for myself. Uh, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So did you have did some things about your life sort of come into focus in a way and make sense in a way that they didn't, like in the writing process? Did that happen?
Yeah. Yeah. I'd say the most significant sort of epiphany was, about my dad. And I think gaining some understanding of why he was the way that he was, which is something that had eluded me for, as a father. It's like, of course I want to spend time with my kid. There's nothing I'd rather have been doing at that time. My son now is 21 and in college. He's not in the house anymore, but at that time, that was the most important thing to me. And it was always difficult for me to sort of remember, all these things I'm doing with my son, I never did with my dad. But anyway, in writing the book, I went through I'm sort of a pack rat. And so I went through all sorts of documents and photos and journals. I kept a lot of journals when I was a kid, which were really helpful in this process. And another thing that I came across was, a memoir of sorts that my grandfather, my dad's dad, had kind of dictated when he was 87 years old. And I talk about this in the book. And it's like 43 single space pages about his career as a lawyer, basically. And there's 6 sentences about my dad. And it's just the facts. It's like when he was born, where he went to school, who he married. That's it. No like anecdotes about family vacations or his foibles or anything like that. And in reading that, it sort of occurred to me that my dad's had kind of learned this emotional distance from his dad, I think, and it sort of got passed down to him. That every kid wants, every boy in particular, I think, really craves their father's love and approval. It's really an important thing, and I think my dad felt that from his dad through work. That's what my dad was, a lawyer, that's what, whenever the two of them, my grandfather and my father, were together, that's what they would talk about, is work. I don't recall them talking about music. The play they had just seen, it was like, almost always about the latest deals my dad was doing and stuff. So I think that was kind of an epiphany for me to realize that, I think part of that was kind of what he'd learned from his dad. And I think there's sort of this emotional distance that's kind of endemic in some ways to the father-son relationship, I think. I think that's changing, but certainly people of a certain generation, that was true. And he was like that as well. So that was helpful to have kind of gotten, a handle on.
Well, yeah, I can't, obviously, you can't be in your dad's head, but I wonder, did he sort of have the same ambition that you did about not sort of passing some things down to his son? And the inertia is just so strong, it's almost impossible, to get off that treadmill, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder about that. This is also in the book. I came across a note that my dad had written to my grandfather when my dad was, I think he was 15, handwritten, just a few lines. And it's something like, apologizing to my grandfather for something that is not clear from the note, but, just want to apologize. And then he says, but, what I said to you, part of what I said to you yesterday is true. And I really feel like you need to spend more time with the family. And I could not believe it when I read that. As part of this book project, I came across this. No, it just literally for a couple of days, I was like, whoa. Because obviously when he was a kid, this was something that weighed on him. His father was never around either. And so you would think, he would have internalized that to some degree and tried to not repeat that. And so, as you're saying, I think there was that kernel of desire in him, but I think he was just so driven that it got pushed aside.
Did you know, was there a point in your own life where you felt that creep and realized that could happen to you if you didn't do something a little different after you had, even after your son was born?
Yeah. I did. I kind of followed in the family footsteps, a family profession of being a lawyer. And so my son was about 13 or so when I kind of had that moment where I was like, you know what? I haven't driven him to school in months. And that used to be that time, that's gold, right? That's like listening to East Street Radio, to your friend behind you there, or talking about our fantasy football lineups, or whatever. And I hadn't done that in literally months because I was embroiled in some knockdown, drag out litigation matter. And I would occasionally, I used to cut out a little early and play golf with him. He's really into golf because my father-in-law kind of got him into golf, and I sort of picked it up to try and be able to do something with him. So I would try and play with him occasionally. And I hadn't done that in forever. And then it kind of reached a breaking point around his bar mitzvah when he was 13. And, all our friends and family had come in from out of town. And I had to excuse myself to work on a brief that was due on Monday. And you know what, this is getting a little ridiculous. So I think that sort of started me thinking about, am I kind of turning into my father, and I don't mean to suggest that the situation with my dad was some horrible thing. Like most people probably, have it worse. I knew that he loved me, and that gets you 95% of the way there. So it wasn't like some terrible situation, but it struck me as sad, particularly after, when I had my own son and started thinking about these issues more. There could have been so much more there. And, it was just disappointing to me that we never got the chance to really experience each other as people.
in the book you talk about this this letter that your dad had written you, but you didn't get it, or I don't think he didn't give it to you essentially right until after he passed away. It was given to you by associate or something of his.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did that change anything about the way you thought about him?
Yeah. My relationship to that letter kind of has evolved over time. It's sort of like my relationship to certain songs. I kind of hear them differently at different times in my life, and they mean different things to me at different times. That letter, when I read it initially, I remember just being really moved by it and being very sad. When I read it, it was sort of like he was saying, he had just gotten his diagnosis of cancer, lung cancer, talking about how, he feels like they caught it early and, he's going to be an outlier. And, but, if the worst should happen, he wanted us to know some of the lessons that he felt would serve us well in life about being a person of substance and treating people with respect, even if you disagree with it, sort of this, some fatherly wisdom. But in it, there was also an expression of regret about not having communicated to my mom, our mother. I have an older brother. Not having communicated to our mother how much he loved her, and not telling her every day that he loved her. And he's like, "Don't you make that mistake when you meet your partner." And he expressed regret about also not having said that to me and to my brother. And he took the opportunity to, in this letter, to say that, I love you and can't imagine having lived such a fulfilling and rewarding life without you two. At times I've gone back and read that and thought, it would have been nice for him to kind of express that in the real world and not in a letter where he is, gone. That kind of showed his shortcomings, his emotional shortcomings. And also, the statement about, don't be afraid of showing your emotions. You may think it's not macho to tell your wife every night that you love her, but don't go for. And then it's like, yeah, he wasn't able to do that. And so at other times in my life, I've kind of looked at that and been like, oh, that's not the best example. But over time, I've come to realize, look, he was like all of us, doing the best he could. He loved us. That was clear. Fighted for us. Maybe had some regrets, like we all do, about things. And I think I've found the ability to cut him some slack and realize that letter was sort of this beautiful expression of his love for us, and to take it in that spirit.
Yeah, it's strange how, I mean, that letter, it tells you that he wanted to do better. And it tells you that he's aware of his shortcomings, but it also shows you how difficult that is in real life to overcome. I mean, there's just such that, like you said, that those things built in childhood are just so difficult to even overcome, 30 or 40 years later.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't pretend to have become, that great at it myself. There are moments I write about in the book, when my son was younger, where I felt like, what? I hear him talking to me, but I'm not listening. I'm thinking about work. I'm thinking about something else. And I needed to kind of pull myself out of it and be like, this is your son talking to you. This is important. And so, I found I wasn't always fully present for him, and it's hard, you've got a lot going on. And so, I don't claim to be an expert at this, but I think recognizing it as an issue is an important one, is an important first step. Anyway.
So one of the things I really liked in the book was I guess you were reviewing your old journals from Alaska, and you had said some unflattering things about these two people that were with you. And in some ways, you were also representative of both of them at the same time. And just how much of, sort of becoming the person that you want to be is accepting that you have things that are essentially in opposite of each other within your own personality?
Yeah. Yeah, I think in order to sort of live freely and comfortable in your own skin, you need to kind of come to grips with all the different elements that might be contradictory in your mind or whatever, and embrace that, and not feel like you're a fraud if you embrace one and not the other, or if you embrace them both, that somehow that's fraudulent because you're not genuinely one or the other or something. So what you're referring to is after my dad died, right after my senior year, he died beginning of my senior year of college. After I graduated, I did this outward bound trip to Alaska, which was bizarre. I grew up in Manhattan, and I didn't even want, or even hiking boots, right? It's sort of this little straight thing. Um, but I needed to not just go hiking. I needed to get out there. And so I did this trip in Alaska, and one of the guys on the trip was a deadhead. Um, who I described as I think in my journal, I called him like a deadhead scumbag, which was, um, uh, as I say in the book, was quite ironic because I was a huge deadhead. I had seen them probably 10 times, when I wrote that journal entry. But, I didn't consider myself a deadhead. Those were the unclean, unwashed. I was a professional, right? I was going to go to law school. And so I wouldn't sort of accepting that part of myself felt like disloyal to my dad. Right. And I really needed to feel, I think the fact that we weren't so close before he died made it kind of supercharged things after he died, this need to feel close to him. And, I think part of becoming and staying a lawyer for so long was that need to kind of feel him close. And I think kind of embracing this, the deadhead side of myself felt like disloyal to him. But then on the other hand, there was this woman who was a lawyer. She was older, and I described her as just sort of this uptight, not fun person. And it's like, well, that's what you're aspiring to become. That's what your dad was. And that's what you're sort of on the path to becoming. And, part of that felt good, kind of following in his footsteps in that way. And it was, I just felt like, I couldn't be both, a deadhead and like a lawyer, which of course, looking back, I was 22 years old at the time. I just had this traumatic experience. I wasn't really thinking straight, but looking back at it, that was kind of crippling for a while in terms of being able to move past that episode and kind of live comfortably in my own skin again. Kind of working through that dynamic took a long time.
But yeah, you've said it a couple times. It just made me think you maybe became a lawyer because you wanted to sort of have a connection and a understanding of your dad. Did it work? I mean, did you gain some understanding of your dad by being a lawyer?
That's a good question. In some ways, yes. I think I got an understanding probably of how his mind worked and how he was such an analytical person and thinker and rational, measured, not quick to emotion. These are all qualities I think that are probably, good to have as a lawyer. His kind of ability to express himself, particularly in writing, that he enjoyed clearly, as did I. That was the aspect of the job I liked the most, was the writing. So yeah, I think so. My wife would tell you that I decided to become a lawyer because I was intellectually interested in it. There was an element, I was interested in environmental policy in college, and I wanted to kind of practice environmental law, which is true. I think though it was more like staying a lawyer for decades, even though I wasn't particularly happy doing it. I think it was more feeling I needed that maintain that connection with my dad. Um, so again, that took a while to kind of unspool.
I don't remember the exact timeline, but you talk about the Pearl Jam song Release, and like about that sort of morphing into your father's voice saying like release him and sort of release this need to be like him. Did this when did that happen in this timeline?
So that was, I think our son was, we were on a sabbatical. My wife's an academic. And so we were in the sabbatical in Chile. Um, and so my son was like 12 years old. So he's 21 now. But yeah, so yeah, 8 years ago, something like that. Um, and yeah, it was that song was one that kind of carried me through some of my darker periods. Folks know that song. It's kind of Eddie Vedder's, lament, prayer uh, to his own biological father who died. He was very young. He didn't really know him. It's kind of a weird story about how he grew up. All he thought was his biological father. Turned out it wasn't, and his biological father lived somewhere else, and thought it was a friend of the family. And anyway, and the lyrics are just like, it just really spoke to me. I came out right when I started law school, basically, and which was a very dark period for me. And dear dad, can you see me now? I am myself like you somehow. I wait up in the night for you to speak to me. I'll hold the pain. But, I checked all those boxes. I did all that. But then, the kind of the crescendo of the song was him just wailing, release me, release me. And I would just scream along it out with my headphones on for years. And this moment that you're talking about is I kind of had this epiphany listening to that song after going on this amazing hike in the Atacama Desert in Chile, and with this guide who was really an authentic person to me, like, and kind of made me feel not authentic, and that my love for the outdoors, which I had after that Alaska trip became kind of a recurring theme in my life, doing outdoors trips, made me feel very fraudulent and kind of brought up all this stuff again. And so I was listening to that song and had this epiphany that, all these years I've been like sort of screaming it at myself or screaming, or I'm not sure who I was screaming it at like God or something. And I, as you say, I had this epiphany that, this is my dad screaming it at me. Release me from this hold that I have on you, this psychological hold. I'm fine. Don't worry about me. Don't live your life, for me, or putting yourself through the ringer over that, release me from this role that I'm playing in your life. And it was a very powerful moment. I was like, that's what I need to hear. That's what I need to do.
Yeah. It's fine. It wasn't about release. It was about alive. But I've heard Vedder talk about how the meaning of that song has sort of changed from a negative viewpoint to a positive viewpoint over, their career. And, so I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
So on the subject of, music and being outdoors, like you talked about how, you never let yourself dream of being, a musician or an outdoorsman because they weren't serious options. And so I'm interested now, I mean, since you've written a book, in our, headlong into music, like what do you dream about going forward?
Oh, wow. That's a great question, because you've caught me at a moment in my life where I'm starting to rethink that, like, because the book project just, it went on for a long time. It took a long time to write. Getting it through the publishing process was long, and then kind of the book was released in February, so not that long ago. And I'm kind of now wondering sort of what is next. And I don't have any, I don't have those grand dreams, um, that you would have as a kid, probably for good reason. At this point, many ships have left the port. Um, uh, but yeah, it was, so I was very into music as a kid, and grew up in New York City, and would go down to Greenwich Village quite a bit to shop for records with my friends. That was one of the main things that we did to hang out. Went to a lot of concerts too, because everybody came through New York City. We were very lucky in that regard. Um, and I picked up the guitar when I was, I think, a freshman in high school. Started playing guitar, and loved doing that. But as you said, I never really took it. It didn't seem like something I could really pursue, professionally, or even, more than just a hobby in some way. And same thing with the outdoors. After that Outward Bound trip, I just continued to do those types of trips, but never really gave myself over to it. And I had role models for that. Friends, one friend in particular who was very into mountaineering and stuff, invited me to come along, and I wouldn't do it because it was going to compromise my ability to go to a job fair at the law school. It's like, and so I didn't ever really allow myself, not that I thought, I certainly was not talented enough to become a, rock star or whatever. Right. But it was more like I never even considered the possibility. I didn't even allow myself to think about that. And but yeah, so now I'm kind of and just sort of coming down from the sort of all the book related stuff, and thinking about what's next. And I'll have to come back on when I figure it out. Let you know.
Well, that's all right. I can do part two with what's next. Yeah. Talking about that Alaska trip, I remember you talking about in there and in the book about how you couldn't, the people from New York couldn't imagine the experience you were having in Alaska. And it just makes me think about how, as humans, we're sort of driven to have these unique experiences, but also be sort of universally understood at the same time. It's just a weird, it's just sort of a complex human need, to be an individual and a part of a group almost at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think one of the things I talk about this in the book, that maybe you would call this ambition or something, but it always kind of bothered me that my dad, such an important person to me, I loved him a lot, obviously. And I carried around in my wallet for many years, for decades, this picture of him that I love. It's just this black and white photo of him, not in a, in weekend clothes, not in a suit and tie, and he has this smile on his face. It's just the perfect image of him. And I remember thinking, sort of in the depths of my, I think probably clinical depression, that this is all that's going to be left of him. That's all that people are going to remember, once my mom dies, and, my brother or me, my son never met him. He's just going to be this picture in a wall. And that's what I'm going to be. I'm just going to be a picture in my son's wallet, who no one else, doesn't mean anything to anybody. And, query whether what's the problem with that. Right. But to your point, it's sort of there's part of me that finds that, sad or something, the need to leave a mark somehow beyond what I think would, fully adjusted person, the mark of your family and your children. And, that seems pretty significant. Yeah, I think there is, at least in some people, this drive. I think I have some of this to be more than just a photograph in his wallet, or on his phone these days.
And his Google Photos.
Yeah, exactly. Up in the cloud. Maybe that's appropriate to be up in the cloud.
Um, and you talk about how, obviously you loved your dad, but you never really knew him. Like, do you think the opposite was true? Like, do you think your dad ever really knew you?
I'm guessing he knew me better than I knew him. Um, I think he probably understood better what I was interested in and what lit me up. Uh, Yankees games, blasting my stereo, um, Rangers playoff game, whatever, like that, a baseball card collection. Like, I think he knew things that I was sort of passionate about,
Okay.
in a way that I couldn't tell you, you know, what music he was into as a kid or who his first crush was, or, you know, even if he was like, was he like a gregarious kid, or was he a loner, or did he ever try pot, or, I don't know anything about him. At his funeral, this guy came up to me and he's like, I'm so and so. I went with your dad. We took a trip after law school, I think it was, to Asia. I'm like, huh. I don't know anything about that trip. And he was like telling me stories about it. And he's like, I don't know how much I should tell you. I'm like, I'm like, who is this person? Why do I've never heard of him? Um, so my dad knew who my best friends were, like that kind of thing. So yeah, I think as a parent, I think you have just sort of an innate understanding of your kids.
Yeah.
Just That's just how it is, I think.
The music, the Substack, like, you said the hardest part essentially of that was giving yourself permission to do it, or accepting that, you have the requisite skills, despite, obviously being a lawyer long enough to know you can write. Like, why is that so hard, do you think? I mean, because for people to sort of accept that they can do other things.
Yeah. Well, I think certainly in my case, I kind of had this imposter syndrome in various venues of my life, right? Like we've talked about some of them already. And music was one of them. And, I had lots of friends who are into music. When I started writing this music, it started as a blog. I guess it was about 12 years ago now, I started it. And yeah, so, and it was a big leap for me to do that, because I was like, well, so and so knows way more than you do about music. This friend of mine, and so does this guy, and like they go to way more shows than I go to now. And like, why do you think you can like write a music blog? Like, why is anyone going to care? You and also, like, is a music blog, is that something a serious lawyer type does, right? And I remember after I launched it, I went to great lengths to like never bring it up at work. And it's funny. It's someone I was on the opposite sides of a case once found out about it. I guess they were doing Rockwell research, and one day at a hearing, he came up to me after. He's like, I love your blog." And I was like, and it's kind of like a psychological mind. I was like, oh God, but that person is still a subscriber. So it's pretty funny. But anyway, yeah, it took a bit of I don't know, chutzpah or something. I felt like it was a big leap. Now, everyone. It's not there aren't that many barriers to entry for something like that, and a lot of people do it who query why they're doing it, right? So why not me? But that wasn't really my perspective. I needed to drag myself kicking and screaming over that line. I was like, the idea was suggested to me by kind of a parent of one of my son's friends. Um, we were at their house. They were having a party, and she asked me what I had been up to. And I mentioned that I had just been in San Antonio visiting my brother-in-law and his family, and went to see this great band at this tiny venue. And she's like, "Oh, what did they sound like?" And I kind of went on for 10 minutes about what this band sounded like. She's like, "Wow." And I'm like, "Yeah, they were great." She's like, "No, you should write a music blog. You talk so passionately about music." And I was like, "Yeah, whatever." Went and got another margarita. But over the next few weeks, I was like, "Oh, they're crazier ideas. I love music. I love writing. Why the hell not?" So I wrote up a piece on that band, and I had so much fun doing it. Like, I was just blasting the music. The band is called Heartless Bastards. That they are no more, but they had a nice run for about 6-7 years. If anyone's listening, I recommend the Arrow album. Fantastic. But anyway, that's I sort of, yeah, that was so much fun. Why not? I should just do it. What the hell? So,
And it's funny because, like you're saying, like obviously the barrier for entry for being a lawyer is so much higher, and the downside, let's say, for messing up is so much higher. But this blog thing that a 16-year-old could do with nobody stopping them. It's just that's the the imposter syndrome's a real thing.
I had more trepidation about sending the email blast about the blog than I did about submitting a brief, like to an appellate court or something. Like, that was fine. I'm going to hit send on that. But this one, it was like, oh my God. But yeah, a big part of how I got over that hump is, I talk about in the book, was my Aunt Wendy, who, as much as this book is about father-son relationships and the emotional distance and that sort of thing, one of the main characters is my Aunt Wendy, my mom's younger sister, who was one of these kind of a fish out of water in our family. And she was kind of like a flower child type, lived north of New York City, about an hour and a half, always wore these colorful sundresses and tons of earrings and bracelets. You could hear her coming a mile away. But she was so into music, and particularly Bob Dylan, like gave me all his records and proselytized to me about Bob Dylan from a very young age. And, I had never really met anyone, an adult like her. This is, when I'm in like middle school or whatever. And she would literally like quote Dylan in conversation, like he was a friend of hers. She'd say, what Bob says. And it's like, who's Bob, right? What looks large from a distance, close up ain't never that big. Like, and so, my parents would always do this eye rolling thing with her, which I kind of adopted as a kid. I kind of, took on that stance towards her. Cause I was kind of had this push pull thing with her. Like, I thought it was very cool, and, how she was so passionate about music. But I got this sense from my parents, like, danger over there, like proceed with caution. Right. And so it was only in retrospect, years and years later, that I kind of realized what an outsized influence she had on me. I'd only see her twice a year or something, very rarely. But it was really her influence, I think, in living her passion, that I was able to kind of channel particularly at that point, when I was thinking about this music block thing. I think that played a big role. And of course that led to these more narrative essays, which led to this book. So it's like I could draw a straight line from her to this book. So she's plays a big role in it.
So what's easier, to write the book, or now to have to talk about it?
Uh, what's easier? It's a lot easier to talk about it.
I had no expectations about the answer to that.
Yeah. I mean, writing, which is not to say I didn't enjoy writing it. I mean, I did, but it was, it was a couple of years in a windowless basement office with a lot of Kleenex. Um, I treated it like a job. I would go down there. I'd try and go down there at 9 a.m. and stay as long as I could. I basically took 2 to 3 years off right before COVID. So my timing was perfect. But it was very emotionally draining. And just also, the craft of it, all the iterations, all the drafts. I don't know how many drafts of this thing. I mean, quite 30 drafts. I mean, it was crazy. And I'm meaning like the first draft being one I thought it was done. Not all, okay, it's done. It's in the can. It's great. Nope. 30 versions later, in a year and a half or a year after that was when I was done. So that it was hard. It looked like, yeah. I mean, talking about the book and going to events, meeting people, doing podcasts like this and meeting folks like that's just fun. I mean, and honestly, I've enjoyed it more than I thought I would. I had no idea whether I would like doing book events, going up in front of a crowd of people and talking about it. But it's been a lot of fun. And hearing people kind of come up to me after about sharing their stories and feeling like there's this broader community out there where this kind of stuff resonates.
Yeah, that's one thing I noticed was, I mean, how much I resonated with parts of the book, despite there being several differences between us. Still, the universality of the music and the what's going through your mind and the distance from your father and all that. It's very universal.
Yeah, I think so.
So you're out of you're no longer a lawyer, right?
Yeah, I kind of went back to, after I finished the book, I went back for a couple of years in a totally different capacity than I had been practicing. And then I kind of quit that before the book launched to just sort of be able to focus.
How hard was that to sort of actually feel like you're giving up that part of your life, or have you come to that yet?
Certainly the when I quit right before COVID, job I'd had for 12 years. And having no plan other than that I wanted to work on this project. That was a leap of faith for sure. It was hard, but it felt, when I did it, and now looking back, you I think it's like with a lot of big decisions you make in your life. You look back and wonder, why did I struggle with that so much, with that decision? I mean, it was, but yeah, it was, I had the luxury, my wife is, a law professor. And so, I had the luxury of being able to take time off, which most people wouldn't. So I felt very lucky. Still, my son was still around at that point, on a daily basis. So I could spend a lot more time with him. And so I look back at it, it was a great period of my life, but it was a little bit scary to do it. But, I would say, I do think it's important to be able to get in touch with your passions a little bit. I mean, I don't think you necessarily have to quit your job and, go open a surf shop or something, but find some way, in the day to day, to kind of touch base and feel that passion. I think that also just helps your kids get to know you better, right? They know who you are. you're not just dad, you're actually a real person. And so um,
You tell the story in the book about getting your son a turntable and some Rolling Stones records, and him not being like super thrilled about it. How is that when sort of your passion isn't, your child's passion?
yeah. Yeah, so I kind of knew that it wasn't going to resonate with him, that gift. But and I wrote this in a note to him, which I'm sure has since disappeared. But explaining that, I understood that this was a gift. I wanted it the gift. This was for his bar mitzvah, so it's sort of like a milestone. I wanted this gift I want to give him a piece of me, so I think I wrote, so one day when you're in college or somewhere, and you want a little piece of your dad, you have it in this gift. And it was a turntable, it was speakers, and it was sort of a beginner set of vinyls, some of which he was into. Like, he wasn't a Rolling Stones fan. My original conception of this, even before we had a child, was that the kid would get every classic Rolling Stones record on this. And, he wasn't that into Stones, so I kind of modified it and got him. He was really into Springsteen, so I got him Springsteen, U2. U2 was probably his favorite band at that time, so I got him all the U2 records. But, he wanted, Madden 15 or whatever it was. What was that? He just, we were different, right? Like, at his age, 13, I was in my room with my headphones on with my friends listening to music. And that's just not, in part because, kids today, they listen to music on their phones, and you don't have to go physically to buy a record. It's not like this ritual, the irony. So he was pretty bummed out about that gift, I think. The irony is that he is now really into music. He plays guitar. He's way better than me. No, that's a pretty low bar. Has a strong appreciation for the classics, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd. I wouldn't call him a deadhead yet, but he knows all of what I sang him dead songs from literally the night he was born. So he has kind of turned into a big music fan. It's funny because in the book I talk about how that gift didn't respond, and the book sort of ends there. And so it's kind of an interesting postscript that he's now really into music, and it's fun because he introduces me to bands I've never heard of.
Yeah, that was my next question.
Yeah, so it's kind of cool in that way.
What's a band he introduced you to that you really like?
I guess I really like the Backseat Lovers, although that's from a few years ago. I don't know. I think he introduced me to them a couple years ago. So that's one band. There's another band, the name of which I'm losing at the moment, showing my age, but I think the song's called Pool House. And yeah, he's we'll be in the car or whatever, and he'll put on a playlist, and so I need to do a better job of like writing down. But yeah.
I prepped you for this question beforehand since we're on music. Your son had a top all-time list or whatever. I don't know what age he was when he wrote that.
Very young. I think like 8.
So what is your all-time top 10?
Yeah, well, so I've wrote down last night, and I came up with 13. So I don't know, but certainly number 1, which I talk about in the book, is Sweet Jane by the Velvet Underground. And just because, like I alluded to before, just that song has been with me my whole life, right? And just meant different things to me at different times in my life. like a party song in high school. And then after my dad died, the song that I kind of returned to and played on guitar endlessly to reconnect with that kid who, was untouched by death and grief and this kind of profound sense of being alone. And then now living in California, it just so totally connects me with New York and kind of grounds me wherever I am. That's kind of who I am. I hear, and I'm waiting for the man that I hear the subway and that like staccato, so anyway, that's one. After that, I don't really have an order, but, certainly Tumbling Dice by the Rolling Stones, because I feel like that is just a mashup of all of great, American music influences, with their spin on it. It's a lot of blues and, but, with their kind of signature swing and I don't know, it's great little riffs. Thunder Road, Tangled Up in Blue, which has a big role in the book. Release, big role in the book. Then in terms of the Dead, Broke Down Palace, the book starts with a lyric from Broke Down Palace, which I was singing to my son the night we brought him home from the hospital, trying to get him to fall asleep because he just wouldn't stop crying. It worked. But then it's tough, another Dead tune, Jack Straw, but only a specific version of it. That count, like the version off Europe 72 is perfect. Other versions are unlistenable, compared to that, because that is, the ideal. Yeah, and then there are some songs that weren't in the book, which it's kind of interesting, like Killing in the Name, Rage Against the Machine. Love that song. Zeppelin, Going to California. Not in the book, but that is up there. An Uncle Tupelo song, Looking for a Way Out. Love that song. And then I got Stir It Up, Bob Marley and the Wailers. That's always been a favorite of mine. And Bob O'Reilly, of course, The Who. Yeah, so those are the ones I came up with. What do you got with it?
Well, actually, I was going to say, I looked through your playlist on your Substack, and I picked out my 10 favorite songs from that list.
Oh, cool.
And a couple of them are the same, but as yours, but in no particular order, because I couldn't really decide on, the number one. But I have Tumbling Dice and Tangled Up in Blue. And then Couldn't Stand the Weather by Stevie Ray Vaughan. And The Day I Tried to Live by Soundgarden.
Oh, nice.
I really love that album.
That album that's a central part of the book, that album. Yeah.
Sugar Magnolia. Alive by Pearl Jam. If somebody put a gun to my head, I'd probably say that's my favorite song.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's a good one.
Me and my best friend from high school, who was an amazing musician. He's actually a band director now. But we would play that song, and we were in whatever, the 10th, 11th grade. He could play that Mike McCready solo at the end, and I would just be playing those boring, rhythm chords and letting him go for 3 minutes. But
that's so great.
Yeah. And Cortez the Killer by Neil Young. I love that song. Surrender by Cheap Trick. I don't know that I really like any other Cheap Trick songs other than that one, but I love that one.
Yeah, that's funny. I'm in the same boat. I could live without everything else, but that song is just brilliant.
Heard Dream Police the other day, and I was like, I hate this song.
Yeah, the original 45 of, well, I can't say it's original. I have a 45 of Surrender and Dream Police, which for a period of time I did like, but I don't listen to it. I haven't heard it in a long time. Surrender, I still occasionally put on. So that's good.
Comfortably Numb by Pink Floyd. Actually, I don't know if it's my favorite Pink Floyd song, but it was on the list. So, and I tried to pick one from each artist. So I wasn't, I didn't want to put all, 3 or 4 Pearl Jam songs on the, but, and you can't beat that solo, and Stairway to Heaven.
I'll tell you a little quick story about Pearl Jam. I had the pleasure of meeting Mike McCready and Stone Gossard I was at a fundraiser for a friend of mine from law school who was running for political office in Washington, the state of Washington. And those guys were going to do an event for him. He was going to interview with them. And so I went up to Seattle because, my friend invited me. It's like, okay. And it was just me, Mike McCready, Stone Gossard, and my friend before the event for half an hour. And those guys were so down to earth. They were taught both, I guess they have daughters who were born on the same day, I think. And so they were both at that time going through the college admissions process. They were visiting schools. They were talking about California. I was like, they had just gotten back from a trip to Southern California to look at those schools that Creedy had. And then Stone was leaving to go see his daughter play soccer after this thing. These guys are so down to earth. And, in fact, I think Mike McCready, during the interview that my friend did during the event, said something because I think my friend asked him, how do you sort of keep your wits about you're this huge rock. He's like, well, it helps when you come home and your kids tell you how much they hate your music.
But yeah, I was on I had a interviewing another guy, and we were talking about, he was talking about how his kids would give him crap for his YouTube videos. And then I was, we got off talking about how, you'd watch, Jimmy Kimmel or, one of those late night shows. And some musician would always tell some story about how their kid either had no idea they were a rock star or couldn't care less. And we're like, Dad, this stop playing me this song. This is stupid, or they hate their music or,
Right. It's so funny.
I think I've heard a story before about how Jacob Dylan was more into Tom Petty than he was his dad, and things like that. And,
that's funny.
Well, I was going to show you. This is how I knew how to play those Pearl Jam songs very poorly. I've had this since I was 13 years old.
Awesome. Wow.
So me and
that's cool.
Yeah. So but yeah, that was, and it's funny because they were a little that album was a little before my time. So I got in on verses and had to go back to,
yeah. So, my son plays Black dude, I mean, he's got it down. I'd never aspired to that. I knew it wasn't in me.
Yeah. They're they're probably, like I said, if you made me choose, I'd probably say it's my favorite band, but it would be close with several. But
yeah.
I've never seen them live though, so I need to do that.
Yeah.
I need to do that.
Well, I've seen them a few times. They're amazing, as you would expect. Still are. I saw them last summer, I think. They're doing as part of a festival up here. Or maybe that was, I think maybe it's 2 summers, the Bottle Rock Festival in Napa, California. But and they were on fire. I mean, they're still rocking out.
Well, so is your son now wanting to go to concerts? Is he saying, Dad, we should go see these guys instead of the way around?
Yeah, in fact, he has his EMT certification, and one of his jobs now is he works for a venue in LA. And so he can kind of pick and choose the concerts that he wants to go to, and attend to, inebriated, 20 somethings or, high on whatever pills. So that, he can't focus completely on the music, but, he's found, a little side hustle there that allows him to go to music a lot. We've been to some shows, when he was home for the summer. We went and saw a Pink Floyd cover band, Brit Floyd.
Okay.
Who were fantastic.
I've heard of them. Yeah.
Yeah, they were great. And that's a band I never saw, Pink Floyd. They had broken up before my time, but it was the next best thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, see, where's he in school?
He's at UCLA.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We saw Langhorne Slim down in LA at the Troubadour, which is like this famous club. Springsteen played there in '73 or something. A lot of people played there. And so that was one of the bands that I wrote about on my blog initially was Langhorne Slim. So he's still kicking, is still great. So we went and saw him at the Troubadour. Terrific show. So yeah, we get to some shows periodically.
And while we're on the the music thing, which is kind of the whole thing, but what do you think that allowed you to like express or understand about why were you so drawn to music? I guess is really the main point of the question. At a young age.
Yeah, it's a good question. If someone said to me, one of these book events that I was being interviewed, or my Q&A partner was this kind of long time New York City music critic type. He's like, I found the book interesting because you're so into lyrics in a way I never was. Like for me, it's about the music, and I don't really care what the lyrics are, but you have a different relationship. And that's not something I had ever thought about before. I mean, I think he's right. Obviously, I care about the music too. It's not like, this is not poetry, right? I mean, I would not just get the same experience of reading the lyrics, right? But I think that there was, I think I was drawn to sort of the lyrics from a pretty young age, so like Dylan and Springsteen and, yeah. And, and as I say in the book, I think it's Springsteen in particular. I mean, I couldn't have articulated this when I was 13, 15 years old, but, there's this real yearning in his music, particularly Darkness on the Edge of Town, which was always my favorite Springsteen record, about trying to understand his father in particular. And I think I probably sensed that somehow in the music. And I think that's partly why I connected with that record in particular so much, was I think I was feeling that with my own dad. Like, who is this guy? Why is he the way that he is? So I think that resonated. A lot of that's the lyrics. But then you get like Soundgarden, and it's the perfect marriage of the lyrics and the music. Right after my dad died, that album was like Linus's blanket for me. I mean, I listened to that album. Put it this way. My girlfriend at the time, now wife, lived in DC. I was in New York. I had a spare copy of that CD in DC. I had headphones, so I couldn't be without that thing. And it was just particularly like the song Mailman, the hello, don't you know me? I'm the dirt beneath your feet. I'm riding you all the way. I'm going to ride you all the way. I want to be ridden all the way down to the bottom. Right. And that riff, it's like a drop D chord. It's like this, it sounds like someone being beaten down, just like grinded down or something. And so it was the self-loathing of the song, which is, I processed a lot of that anger that I had, internally. And it was kind of came out of self-loathing. And that record is so, I mean, as I say in the record, in the book, that record, Chris Cornell was the Buddhist monk setting himself aflame. For me is how I interpreted that. Like, he screamed for me because I didn't know how to off-gas the toxicity of this situation and all these emotions that I had. And so the combination of that music with those lyrics, the self-loathing, the end of the day, I tried to live. I mean, the lives we make never get us anywhere but dead. I'd eat that up. but it was coupled, that line has a different feel to it if it's being, if you're strumming an acoustic guitar by yourself, right? Like the power of that music and those riffs. So now I've forgotten the original question, but
That's
hopefully.
me too. Okay.
Sorry, that was a little long-winded.
Yeah, it's funny. You were talking about Dylan a little bit there, and it reminds me of sort of the bookend conversations with your Aunt Wendy that eventually you say to your son about what the song is about, and about how it's about everything.
Mm-hmm.
I remember, like, I've had this conversation with my wife several times about, like, I'll listen to songs, like Dylan or Springsteen obviously has a lot of it too. And I think Brandon Flowers from the Killers kind of has the same thing, or Eddie Vedder. Like, I usually have no idea what they're talking about. But I tell my wife, it sounds like they're talking about nothing and everything at the exact same time.
Yeah. I get that. Yeah. I mean, you could probably write several different essays about what these songs mean, different theses. And again, at different times of your life, they mean different things. Like I think about Sweet Jane, for the longest time, the in the bridge, I don't know if this is on the original or the live version, but it's anyone who ever had a heart wouldn't turn around, break it. Anyone ever played a part wouldn't turn around and hate it. Like that, there was like a live version of that where he puts that as the first verse, and like hearing it in that way reoriented me to that song. Like it became more of a positive sort of thing, because there is a line there sort of towards the end that life is just to die. That's the line I gravitated towards after my dad. Like I internalized that. But then years later I listened to it again, particularly after hearing the kind of this reorganization of the song in my head, and I was like, is that line, and that life is just to die, but anyone who ever had a heart wouldn't turn around and break it. Anyone who ever played a part wouldn't turn around and fake it. Like he's basically saying that you shouldn't buy that. You're going to be told, life is just to die, but don't believe it. But I hadn't thought about that interpretation of it until years later. So like, what the hell is that song about? I couldn't tell you what that song is about. I've listened to that song thousands of times. In fact, my son once asked me what that song was about, and I told him I have no idea. But it creates this feeling, and you pick up these little snippets of it, and it means something very specific, but it's morphable, changeable. Interesting. That's the beauty of it.
Yep. Yeah, that's I'm listening to songs like now, and like I was about to say I understand them now, but I probably just understand them differently now than I did when I was a teenager, or when I was in college, or when my son was being born, as opposed to when he's 13, or whatever.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot. I think I've always attributed this to Dylan, but I might be making it up about someone asking him what some song was about. He's like, it's whatever you think it's about.
So I could talk about music all day long, but I'm sure you got some stuff to do. So instead of ending on music, let's end on your son. Like, you're talking about you tried to give him a piece of yourself, and so he could really know who you are. Like, what do you hope he's learned? I mean, if someone asks him 20 years from now, what was your dad like? What do you hope he's saying?
Yeah, I hope that he would sort of take from his experience with me. I've kind of alluded to this, sort of the need to recognize what you're passionate about and take it seriously, and not brush it aside because you think for whatever the self-constraint you've put on yourself. I mean, we all live our lives subject to constraints, like externally imposed constraints, health, financial, whatever. But I feel like we also oftentimes put some constraints on ourselves without even knowing it, right? I certainly did that. And so I I think through the process of writing this book, that was part of me coming to grips with that. And, and like I said, with the music blog, breaking out of that, and doing that, which led to this book, kind of getting in touch with your passions and, for me, it really started when my son was born, because this lifelong passion for music that, it was lifelong. it kind of taken a back seat as I became, the professional type. And it just came out of nowhere when he was born. I guess I just started singing to him the first night he was born. And then for the next 14 years until he started staying up later than me at bedtime. And because I wanted him, this is who I am, right? Mm-hmm. And I want him to know who I am. So hopefully he'll take from me, us, the importance of paying respect to that part of yourself. Taking on this book project, I think maybe is another example of that. So hopefully he'll say something along the line of someone who, kind of struggled for a period of time to kind of live without these self-imposed constraints. And that's a lesson, hopefully, that he takes. It's funny because, like my parents, they never told me I couldn't, be a rock star. They would come and tell me to turn the guitar down or whatever, but this was something I just put on myself. So, yeah. I mean, obviously I hope he thinks, well, my dad was someone who was present, who loved me, all that stuff. Of course. But,
no, that's good. Because you're right. There's so many expectations that people put on themselves or restrictions that they put on themselves. And I can't imagine that somebody's parents thought that's what I meant to do. And so, it's passed down, and obviously it's not just your parents, it's society in general will put these restraints on you. But, like I said, I can't imagine any parent was like, that's what I was hoping I would do, is put him in a box.
Yeah, exactly. And, it took me a long time to figure that out. So if I can save him decades of that, that would be a win.
Definitely. All right. So your Substack, your blog, what is fine tuning? Is that?
Yeah, fine tuning. Yeah, I converted over to Substack about a year and a half ago.
Okay.
So that's where I'm currently residing. There's also, my website is just mattfogelson.com. That's got links to all the essays that I've published and book excerpt and stuff.
Great. And once again, congratulations on the book. It is excellent, if I haven't said that yet. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. And appreciate you having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it was fun. I knew it would be I knew when I saw music and fatherhood that it would be I had to have you on. So
yeah,
I appreciate you doing it.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. All right. Let's keep in touch, and it was good talking to you, man.
Great. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.